Now being
Nashville experienced a pretty massive flood in 2010, and that was a huge investigative opportunity for us here in the aftermath. I'll talk mostly about that, but I've also covered tornadoes and investigative tornadoes coverage afterwards, and also covered hurricane. Covered a hurricane before, so I'm well versed in handling these. But I will say that the Nashville flood, which was pretty overwhelming for all of us because of just getting around and the difficulty of that. But the most important thing that I think people can do is listen to people's on the ground, their responses for how they were warned. If they felt like they had enough warning, if they told if evacuations happened properly, to ask people that, because it's so vital that we rely on we have to tell the stories of these people, and they're the ones that were on the ground, so they understand the victims, they understand how this happened. In Nashville's situation, not only did we do an investigation into the Army Corps and how they released waters through the dams that they did not accurately reflect to the National Weather Service, and to the general public, but also rescue efforts, and how there were some botched rescue efforts with people and companies, especially one company in particular, which is the MTA, the Mass Transit Authority here in Nashville. Their workers were trapped in a building for about 10 to 12 hours, and there were repeatedly employees wanted to leave, but they were told they couldn't, or their jobs would be risked, or their job was at risk. So that's the main thing. And the way that I found out about the problem with the MTA employees is that when we did our interviews, actually the MTA employees actually came to me, our investigative unit, with concerns about this. But literally the way I knew to investigate the Army Corps of Engineers handling is that I was out covering it like every reporter should. Just drop the investigative title if you're an investigative reporter, and just go out and cover the storm, because that's the only way you're going to be able to find your stories. Is that a victim said to me, the water rose, and then it lowered, and then it rose again, and we weren't. It didn't make sense, because the floods had come, and then suddenly the water, it had peaked, and then it rose even higher, even after they told us that it wouldn't raise any higher. And we kind of thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then we found out what had happened was that the Army Corps of Engineers had, at the height of the flood, had released waters through a dam without conveying that to the National Weather Service or to the public in the amount of water that was being released. So it really confused a lot of people that the water was supposed to settle at a certain level, supposed to peak, but then suddenly it went higher than it was supposed to. And nobody could figure out why, and the result was that the Army Corps really didn't have a choice but to release some of this water through a dam. They just never communicated that in depth with the National Weather Service and the general public. So that's why we have the lawsuit ongoing now between the Opryland Resort and the Army Corps of Engineers, because Opryland was told that it would crest and they would be okay. Well, suddenly they flooded, and they were very confused why that was, because the National Weather Service had told them that it would peak at a certain time, and it didn't, because more water was released into the river. So again, that's the main thing is, get out there and talk to people. Don't rely on, government statements and things like that. You have to ask people, how did you feel the rescue efforts went? How did you feel? Did you have enough warning? And then the next step is, if you find people that feel like they weren't, rescued in enough time, it is almost, or if there is some kind of problem, you have to act almost immediately to, if it's any type of government response that looks to be botched, because once it falls under the umbrella of that, now this is part of an ongoing investigation, the government very well could take all of their emails and kind of lock it down, and you end up fighting for them, and you'll ultimately win. But when the Army Corps situation happened, we immediately requested all of the emails shared between the National Weather Service and the Army Corps of Engineers discussing the flood, from the moment that the rain started to about a couple days afterwards. So we would have that. And we got it in our window, and we got it before it it actually got shut down as part of the government's investigation. So we got those emails. That was important. And so it's essential also to think about how it was supposed to work. Now, in New York, obviously this is an unprecedented event, but it is an island, so there obviously is a flooding plan in place. So it is imperative, if you haven't gotten them already, to seek out the city's flood preparations, and then to review how it was supposed to work and how it actually did work. And so that is key, is that as the storm is kind of winding down now, is to under the Open Records Act, is to say, I want copies of your flood preparation plan. I want to understand how it was supposed to work and how it actually did work. There was a lot of buildup to this storm, so a lot of people knew that this was coming. The rescue efforts, if there were deaths, which I believe at this point there are 10 in New York, we had several in Nashville. We also looked at each individual death to see how the person died and if something could have been done to save them. And it's difficult, but you do have to look and see how they died, and what kind of preparation they took. We had some an older couple that died in their car, drowned in their car. They couldn't get out because they left too late. And that is in itself a story that needs to be told after a natural disaster if people waited too long, and that's what caused them to die. But beyond the getting out there, you've got to make the requests immediately, because these government agencies are swamped as it is. But you've got to have it on record that you've asked for them pretty quickly. And then you have to go into finding the people that were actually impacted by this.